Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Sudan. What is happening in Sudan is tragic. There's been a war going on there since the 5th of April, and it seems this is a new dark chapter that many people can only see as tragic, to say the least. Once you've turned into this dark period, I think people are frightened of what is going to happen next. There are going to be many days, not months, and years even, of this absolutely, utterly meaningless fighting. It is tragic. This is BBC's assessment of the situation in Sudan.
An emergency too, and many countries, including the UK, the US, and France, have evacuated their nationals. What they leave behind is a conflict which has the potential to do further harm. This is the UN.
Sudan could become increasingly fragmented, which would have a devastating impact on the region. And even if one side wins, Sudan will lose.
The hope remains that the fighting will stop. Maybe civilian rule will follow. But Sudan's history teaches us that neither are certain.
That is the tragedy of Sudan. It doesn't matter which of the two sides wins.
The area
The
of
truth
land
is,
between the banks of the Severn Estuary and the northeast Wales coast
the truth is, Sudan, the country, will lose. That is the tragedy. It doesn't matter which of the two sides win, the country will lose. Even if they finally come to their senses and make a compromise, the country would have lost a lot. Is there lessons to be learned here for Zimbabwe? I think there is. Zimbabwe has been independent for the last 43 years. And we have had the misfortune of having a regime that believes that they have the right to govern the country, regardless of the democratic will of the people. And the country has sunk into serious poverty, tragic poverty. This is what is at the base of what is happening in Sudan. Sudan, ever since the country gained its independence in 1956, has had the misfortune of being ruled by the army, who didn't care about law and order, justice, prosperity for all, but who only cared about their own individual, selfish needs. The two generals who are fighting right now in Sudan, they are each fighting to be the dominant one. They're each fighting because they don't want to relinquish the power and wealth that they have accumulated by virtue of being in power. This is exactly what is happening in Zimbabwe. ZANU-PF leaders like Emerson Mnangagwa have been in power since the country's independence. And the prospect of losing the election is just simply unthinkable to them. People like VP Chiwenga, he was behind the coup of 2017. The coup was not about ending Mugabe's dictatorship. Yes, it was on the surface, but actually it was about fighting within ZANU-PF for dominance. Mugabe wanted the army, the likes of Chiwenga and others, booted out, and a new ruling elite introduced. And so there were two factions. And it just so happened that the Lacoste faction prevailed. So it was a power struggle, nothing to do with about good governance. And VP Chiwenga and those around him clearly had no intention of making sure that the elections in 2018 were free, fair, and credible. Although, of course, after the coup, that's what they wanted to portray. The reality is they had no intention of that at all. They didn't risk their own lives by staging a coup and then risk losing that power in a free, fair, and credible election. The failure to hold free, fair, and credible election and have good governance is what has undermined Zimbabwe society. And what has made some of these individuals, like Chiwenga, Mnangagwa, extremely rich. And when you are that rich, you become addicted to power. The threat of the possibility of losing that power is unthinkable, to the point that they would be responsible for starting a war in Zimbabwe. Make no mistake about it, ZANU-PF has always made it very clear that if they are not the ones ruling the party, they will make Zimbabwe ungovernable. That is the kind of threat that someday becomes a reality, as it has become a reality in Sudan. We cannot deny that the last 43 years, we had many opportunities to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. The golden opportunity to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship was during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. Sadly, Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends, who were given the responsibility to implement the reforms then, took their eyes off the ball. They failed to implement even one meaningful reform. Why? Well, simple. Mugabe bribed them. He gave them the trappings of high office, the generous salaries and allowances, the ministerial cars, and for Morgan Tsvangirai, the US $4 million mansion in Highlands. And the MDC leaders forgot about the reforms. Not even SADC was able to nag them to implement even one meaningful reform. And so the ZANU-PF dictatorship continued after the GNU. ZANU-PF has now become so deeply entrenched in power that the possibility of the regime, of the party losing power, or fragmenting into two factions that could end up throw the country into a war situation is real. One has got to ask, how else is this system going to end? If you're not going to end it in a democratic, peaceful way, then it's going to end in a violent way. It could be either be street protests, which the regime, if it's still in power, will ruthlessly crush, or it could end up with another coup. Now that in his infinite wisdom, Justice George Chuweshe judged that the last coup in 2017 was just, legal, and justified, and constitutional. So the next coup will no doubt be legal, justified, and constitutional too. But if he doesn't succeed, we could end up with two warring factions. And Zimbabwe would be no different from what is happening in Sudan. The truth of the matter is we are seeing this coming. We may not have reached the point of no return yet, but we are getting there. This is what is so frightening. Zimbabwe needs to wake up to the reality that we need to restore the rule of law. We need to restore justice. We need to end this present political system that has failed so many of our own people. Because failure to do so would only drag us closer and closer to the point of no return. To the same point that Sudan has been dragged to. Years of tyrannical dictatorship undermine the people's faith in the rule of law. That is the reality. Right now, Triple C are saying that they are urging people to participate in these elections. After 43 years of rigged elections, another rigged election would only give people the feeling that free, fair, and credible elections, democratic rule in Zimbabwe is a waste of time. So take the law into your own hands. It will just be another excuse for justifying the war. We can make Zimbabwe, democratic elections in Zimbabwe work. And at the present moment, yes, I agree, totally agree. Many people have said to me again and again, don't talk about reforms. It's too late. I totally agree. You can't implement any meaningful reforms 4 months before the elections. It's too late. What we can do now is make sure that we say it very clearly and loudly that this election process is flawed, illegal. How can you have any meaningful election when you don't even have a verified voters roll? When 3 million people in the diaspora denied the vote for no other reason other than that the governing party fears those people will not vote for ZANU-PF, which is why they're doing it. the opposition is participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that the ordinary person's vote will not count. They also know that by participating, they're giving the regime legitimacy. And still they participate. Why? Out of greed. They are after the few seats ZANU-PF is offering to entice the opposition to participate. We should also denounce that. We should make it abundantly clear that this is a discredited opposition. And no thinking Zimbabwean should participate in these elections, knowing fully well that by participating, all you are doing is giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. If we are strong in those two areas, we'll make it very difficult for SADC leaders to grant ZANU-PF legitimacy. SADC must be pressurized to stop granting ZANU-PF legitimacy. If we stop ZANU-PF getting legitimacy at the end of 2023, it will put us back into the situation we were in 2008, when the country was formed to go into a government of national unity. The difference between the government of national unity of 2008 and the government of national unity that will emerge out of this would be that this time we can insist on competent men and women who will get all the democratic reforms implemented. It is not rocket science. These reforms is nothing special to them. They are not complicated. Just because Morgan Tsvangirai and company failed to implement even one does not mean we do not need reforms anymore. Nor does it mean that no one else can implement them. We need the reforms now more than ever before, and they can be implemented easily. The price of failing to implement the democratic reforms is a move taking us closer and closer to the edge of the kind of instability that we are now witnessing happening in Sudan. We should learn lessons from what is happening in Sudan. We can still avoid getting to that point, the point of no return, falling over the edge. This is up to us. As the BBC reporter there clearly showed, the international community, as much as they may want to help, at the end of the day, if we are not helping ourselves, if the chips are down, they will move in, make sure that their own nationals are out of the country, and leave us, Black Zimbabweans, to face the music on our own. Instability in Zimbabwe would affect the whole region, which brings us to our friends in SADC. There are SADC leaders who have been keen to support ZANU-PF, regardless of the political reality on the ground. My warning to them and to the SADC nationals out there is that if we support bad governance in Zimbabwe, and SADC leaders have supported bad governance in Zimbabwe, let's be honest about that. At the end of the day, it will come to affect the whole region. We have seen the xenophobia attacks in South Africa of Zimbabweans and many other nationals because of desperation. Zimbabweans have been flooding to South Africa. Think of how worse the situation would be if there was serious fighting in Zimbabwe. Already there is instability in Mozambique. The last thing we want to do is give that sense of helplessness an excuse to spread to other countries in the region. Sudan, what is happening there is tragic. And I hope that the situation is quickly resolved before it gets worse. And at the present moment, to be quite honest, there's very little hope of that. The chances are that the situation will get a lot worse before it can get better. It is tragic. But let's learn some lessons from the past. Let's learn lessons from our neighbors. Zimbabwe has been, they said, the misfortune of being governed by ruthless thugs for 43 years. I don't think the situation in Zimbabwe is that stable. But if you should be, it should get to the point where there is an outbreak of the war, any fighting in the country, it will be very difficult to stop the fighting and to stop the situation getting worse. We can stop it now. And I think this election, this 2023 election, is an opportunity to stop it. The question is, what did we do? That will be the question that people would ask. What did you do to stop ZANU-PF getting legitimacy in 2023? That is the lesson that we must take home. What is happening in Sudan is not special. It can happen in Zimbabwe anytime. Zimbabwe has not been a bastion of peace, justice, and prosperity and human dignity. And as long as the situation remains like that, it remains fertile ground for conflict. There's so much despair in Zimbabwe today. We have got to address it, come up with really meaningful solutions to ending that despair, giving people hope that the situation can be changed. Not false hope that we are going to win big when we know these elections are already done. These elections are already rigged. ZANU-PF has got the whole election results in the bag. I think we've been very slow in tackling our problems. But be that as it is, we really can't afford to do nothing about the present situation. Food for thought, yeah. Thank you and good night.